Hi, welcome to Storytime. I'm glad that you're here. This is Victoria's story. This is another part of Mistress, Wife, and Kids. A story told in three parts, from the perspectives of the woman that was the affair, the wife that was the betrayal, and the man in the middle. But this part is mine. I'm Victoria, the wife. This isn't the story I ever imagined telling, not because it's rare, but because women like me are rarely the ones who speak it out loud. I'm the steady one. I am the planner. I am the woman others lean on because others just can't get it together. I can remain composed under pressure. Women like me, we get called strong, intimidating, and unshakable. We're expected to carry the weight of everyone else's mess with a smile. But underneath that surface, there's anger, there's grief, and there's a weariness so deep that sometimes it doesn't even have words. This is a story of what happened when the man I married betrayed me and I chose not to fall apart. This isn't a story of instant forgiveness or blind loyalty. It's a story of assessment, of boundaries, of painful clarity and quiet courage. I stayed, but I didn't stay the same. This is a story of how I kept my spine straight and my heart soft. How I learned to protect my peace while still choosing love. And how sometimes the most dignified choice a woman can make is to stop fixing what isn't hers to fix and still find a way back to her wholeness. Thanks for listening. Here we go. There are a handful of days I know I'll never forget in my lifetime. And this was certainly one of them. Not because of what he said, though that cut deep enough. It was the way the whole day felt off from the very start. Like something was brewing right from the very beginning. I've learned to trust those undercurrents. The air feels heavier, the timing slips, small things starting going wrong in a pattern you can't quite name. That morning, I remember brushing my teeth and suddenly thinking I need to double check something on the sterilizer logs. No reason, just a feeling. Then I spilt coffee on my blouse before I even left the house, which almost never happens. I changed, reapplied my lipstick, and kept moving. The rest of the day unfolded like it was testing me. The clinic entrance hadn't been clean the night before. I swept it myself. One of the dentists had been injured, so I stepped into his schedule as well as mine. My assistant, God bless her, was in the washroom more than she was beside me. The sterilizer glitched. The supply shipment was late. A patient cried, another was rude, and I took it all in stride. I always do. But underneath it, I could feel it. Something was off. Not loud, just that pressure in the chest, that quiet tension that builds up when too many small things go sideways, and you're too busy to stop and name them. By the time I got home, I was stretched thin. The smell of my mother's cooking floated through the open windows, cabbage rolls and warm bread. I remember that exact mingling of scent. I remember the curve of the sunlight on the steps, the wind catching the hem of my jacket. And I remember Gabe, sitting in the breezeway, waiting. His shoulders were hunched like a boy caught doing something shameful. His jaw was tight, and in the space between one breath and the next were off. I knew something irreversible was about to be said. We need to talk, he told me. I had expected this at some point in our marriage. Maybe he'd want to tell me something life-changing, and here it was. I knew something would happen someday, because that's how it always had been with Gabe. I make the big decisions. I manage the hard things. He coasts until I draw the line. And not out of malice, but avoidance. He's never been the type to want conflict, never eager to speak up. So over time, I became the voice, the structure, the one who plans the trips, books the appointments, sets the tone of how we live. And the world assumes I'm the bossy one. What they don't see is this. I never wanted to be in charge of everything. I just couldn't stand the silence of indecision. So I filled it, like I always do. I wanted to drop my bag and pretended I hadn't heard what he had said. Just once, I wanted the world to give me a break, to let me slip into the hot tub and let the steam soften everything I've been holding together. I said to him, "Come in the hot tub with me, we can talk there." "No," he said, "this is serious." And I knew. Chapter 2. Thoughts popped in my head. Did he get a cancer diagnosis? Was he involved in some kind of financial scheme that failed? Did he want a divorce? Yet, all of those thoughts came flashing through my head. I knew another woman would be involved in this conversation. I knew before he said a word that my life was about to change in a big way. And I wasn't expecting how it would all feel. like my heart split open without warning, a clean, silent tear, no blood, just shock. He didn't speak in long sentences. Gabe rarely does when it matters. He handed me the ultrasound, crumpled, folded, smudged like it had been handled too often, hidden too long. My fingers touched it even before I realized I reached for it. I asked no questions. Not then. I listened. I don't remember every word, but the bones of it were simple. It happened once. She was married, she was pregnant, and the child, let's rephrase that, children, were his. I told him I needed to think, and then I walked straight out the back door. No yelling, no drama, I just walked. I undressed slowly as if nothing had just shattered. Placed each piece of clothing on the deck chair folded like I might need them in a few minutes. And then I sank into the hot tub. At first, I couldn't process what I'd heard. I was numb, but only for a little while. So, okay, my husband had an affair, not just sex, something deeper, with a married woman who used to work at the daycare our boys went to years ago. I could barely remember her name. I think she was part of that strict religious group so common around here. I remember the way the woman dressed, long skirts, no makeup, and quiet voices. Always polite, but always a bit apart. My head tilted back, eyes closed, steam rising into the night air. And in my mind, true to form, started scanning for structure, for logic. I needed to organize this. At this moment, I hoped he wanted a divorce, because if he did, I'd give him one. No argument, no delay. I will never stay with somebody who doesn't want to be with me. But if he wanted to fix this, then everything was about to change, radically and permanently. I stayed in the tub until my skin wrinkled and my body stopped shaking. Then I got dressed, went back inside, and sat down at the dinner table with our sons, Gabe, and my mother and mother-in-law. I didn't know how I did it. I ate. I talked. I passed dishes like nothing had happened. Somewhere between the salad and the dessert, I looked at my boys and said calmly, "You two are on your own this evening. Your dad and I are going for a drive." No one asked why. I think they all felt it, that something had shifted, and I wasn't about to fall apart. Chapter 3. I didn't need to have the whole conversation that night. I needed space, not to cry, not to rage, just to think clearly. I've always believed we don't make our best decisions when we're emotionally flooded. I don't let myself get flooded. I took a breath. I zoom out, and I ask myself what matters. I still do that to this day. What matters is our sons. What matters is the clinic. What matters is the truth. And the truth is, Gabe did this. And that doesn't mean I let the consequences decide for me. I could have kicked him out. I had every right to. And I think part of him expected it. But I didn't. Not because I was weak, but because I wasn't ready to choose anything yet. It was such a confusing time. I think at that time I knew what I wanted, and yet I knew I didn't. I needed to understand what it all meant, not just for me, but for the whole picture, for the family we built, for the life that we built, for the work that we do. And also, let's consider the woman now carrying his kids. And yes, even for Gabe too, not because I owed him anything, but because I loved him once, and because he's the father of my children. Oh, I think I still love him. At this point, I wasn't sure. But I wasn't going to rush to hate to protect my ego. And that's the thing people don't understand about women like me. We don't fall apart. We assess. I went for the drive, not because I needed to get more information, but because I needed to watch him, to hear the way he spoke, to feel whether there was regret or just panic. I wasn't listening for the right words. I was listening for the truth behind them. I was already calculating the fallout. How would this affect our boys, the clinic, the family dynamic? I mentally scanned the calendar for any events I might need to cancel or reframe. But underneath that all, I was also checking in with myself. Do I want to stay? Could I ever look at him the same way again? Do I have the capacity to move through this without losing myself? The answers weren't clear, not yet, but I knew this much. I would not be rushed. I would not be shamed. I would not be anyone's victim. This is my life, and I will choose how to move forward. Chapter 4. I didn't need this. Not really. The timeline, the excuses, not the half-truths shaped to protect feelings. There was only the one thing I really needed to know. Do you want to stay married to me and actually do the work to make this better than it's ever been? Or do you love her and want a new life with your mistress, full of fresh starts and pretend innocence? When I asked that, he didn't hesitate. Yes, he said. And then I snapped. Yes to what, Gabe? This is not a full sentence. What are you telling me? Pick what you want. Make up your mind. Make a decision like a grown man for once in your life. Then he looked at me and he held out his arms like he was trying to pull me into something soft and familiar and reassuring. But I didn't want it, not yet. It wasn't anger and it wasn't punishment. It was something more primal than that, boundary. My body was drawing a line even before my brain could finish explaining it. I stared at him, really looked at him. How had I not seen this happening? What could I have done to prevent this from happening? What if this isn't on me at all? I'm not going to be the solution for this mess, and that was for sure. We could work through this, that much was clear, but I needed space. I needed to protect the part of me that still wasn't sure if I was staying to rebuild or staying to transition into something entirely new. So I shook my head. Don't touch me, not now, I said. He didn't press. He let his arms fall to the side. As we stood there quiet, both of us knowing that this was only the beginning. Chapter 5. After that night, things settled into a strange kind of stillness. Not peace, just silence and tension braided through it. We moved through the next days like two people who had decided not to blow up the house, but yet hadn't agreed how to fix the foundation. We slept in the same bed, spoke only when necessary, shared meals with our boys and mothers as if nothing had changed, but everything had. I began to make plans. Quietly, methodically, in the way I do most things. I didn't tell Gabe right away, not because I was hiding anything, but because I needed space to think without his guilt or hope clouding my vision. I hired someone to take over the clinic logistics, somebody capable, discreet, familiar with the rhythms of our business. I needed margin. I couldn't afford to burn myself out managing broken systems when I still was deciding whether to keep my marriage. I also called a contact, someone who used to do background checks for the HR purposes in our business. I didn't want dirt. I wanted clarity. Who was this woman? What kind of life had she lived? Who surrounded her? What support did she actually have? What came back was what I expected. Elena wasn't dangerous. She was sheltered and overprotective, underprepared. A woman raised in a system that told her not to question and not to want too much. She had slipped outside of this belief system and this faith, and now she was in free fall, and she was pregnant with 3 of Gabe's children, triplets. I stared at that ultrasound again, those 3 clustered shapes. It didn't matter how it had happened. What mattered now was what would happen next. I bought a cheap phone, loaded it with minutes, programmed a few key numbers, mine, Gabe's, and a local cab company. Then I wrote down an address and a time 1 week out, and I made a decision. I would deliver it to Elena myself, not because I wanted to see her, and not because I needed to assume or assert anything, but sometimes moments require eye contact, and this was one of them. Chapter 6. I went to the hospital myself, not because I wanted to see her, not because I owed her anything. I needed to make eye contact with the married woman who got to know my husband too well, to the woman who would now, through no choice of my own, would be wound into the fabric of my life somehow, some way. I'm still not sure on what level. I'd seen the ultrasound with my own eyes. 3 tiny bodies, clustered in black and white, one image, folded and worn, handed to me like it meant nothing, yet it changed everything. This wasn't a mistake. This was a future. I dressed neatly. No makeup, no jewelry. I didn't want a single distraction from what needed to be said. The nurse at the desk gave me the room number without hesitation. I said I was part of her care circle. No one questioned it. I walked the corridor calm and steady, fully aware I was stepping into a scene that could have belonged to another life, one I never asked to be part of. When I entered the room, she was sitting up in the bed, legs drawn slightly towards her belly, staring out the window. She turned when I opened the door. She knew who I was before I said a word. I saw it in her eyes. "Elena," I said, closing the door quietly behind me. She didn't speak, just nodded, guarded. I'm Victoria, Gabe's wife. There it was, the barely visible flinch, but I caught it. I stepped closer and placed an envelope on the small rolling table near her bed. Calm, no rush. Inside is a phone, I said. It's prepaid. My number is in it, so is Gabe's, and a local cab number in case you need it. She watched me like I was a storm that hadn't quite made landfall yet. You're carrying 3 children. That connects us, whether we like it or not. So next week you'll come to my home. We'll sit down. We'll talk. I folded a piece of paper from my coat pocket, our address, and a time 1 week from that day. This isn't about friendship, I said. It's about reality. I don't need you to like me. We do not have to like each other. But this, I nodded towards her belly, this changes everything. She still hadn't spoken, and that was fine. This wasn't a two-way dialogue yet. I'm not your enemy, I said. I'm not here to comfort you either. I turned to leave. Show up, I said. That's all I expect. And don't come alone. Bring someone with you. Then I walked out. Because sometimes grace doesn't look like kindness. It looks like structure and boundaries and a place to begin. Chapter 7. My first and foremost concern, my sons. How would this affect them? The gossip, the questions, the slow leak of judgment into their lives? Would there be court battles, custody fights, tabloid-style whispers in the parking school lot? I couldn't bear the thought of them being dragged into something they had no say in. For a moment, maybe longer, I thought about getting out of town, out of the country even, taking the boys, leaving Gabe with the clinic and the mess, giving us all space from the spotlight that was surely coming. And yes, part of me wanted revenge. I didn't know what that would look like yet, but I wanted to hurt him the way I was hurting. I reached out to Emily, a longtime friend and a sharp divorce lawyer. I just needed her take, just in case. Then I spoke to my mother. I thought she'd tell me to save face, protect the family name, keep things discreet. But she didn't. She looked me in the eye, steady, unwavering, and she said, "If you're afraid of how bad this will look on the family, then do the best possible thing for the children, all of the children." She didn't say your sons. She said all the children. What do they need, Victoria? To feel loved, wanted, safe, and protected? You can do this. Not everyone can, but you can. I let that settle inside me. Later, I had a cup of tea with my mother-in-law, just the two of us. She nodded and listened and finally said in her beautiful voice, "You adults make a mess, and I don't get involved. I will love the children, all of the children, and not get involved in this bad mess. Only love from me, okay? Got it?" "Got it," I said. That was pretty clear. That night, I stripped down and got into the hot tub, my thinking place. The only space where my body and mind could float at the same time. I hadn't talked to Gabe yet, not for a while, not about this next part, because the next move was mine, and here I am again, looking like the control freak, because somebody has to make the decisions, and I don't want it to always be me. In a perfect world, Gabe would accept responsibility. He'd say the right things. He'd step up and do what's needed, but he doesn't, so I do. And some nights when the house is quiet and I'm lying in bed with the ceiling fan humming, I think about what the end might look like. I imagine dividing the clinic, splitting holidays, buying a smaller place. Then I flip back again, picturing a life where we could heal, where this mess becomes a footnote, not an ending. I go back and forth more than I care to admit. I'm not afraid of starting over. I just don't want to do it unnecessarily. If he wanted this marriage to continue, if he wanted a future with me, he could follow the boundaries I was setting. Not out of guilt, but out of commitment. I had written down some things, some requirements I needed from him. That he would never be alone with Elena again. He would sell the cottage where the pregnancy began. No more solo trips or separate vacations, only family time. He would begin counseling immediately, not to prove anything to me, but to prepare himself for fathering 3 more children and negotiating between his mistress and his wife. I hired a building manager at the clinic to take over the dozens of things I normally did. I needed space to be present for my boys and to rebuild something honest with Gabe, if that was still possible. And I laid out expectations for Elena too. She would notify the family when she had appointments and updates and key decisions, no secrets and no surprises, just communication. I've learned that sometimes she used her brother Levi to do that, but that's okay. It's very awkward. Because if we're going to navigate this storm, I wasn't about to do it blindfolded, and I certainly wasn't going to do it small. Chapter 8. So I'm in this place where I want my marriage to work, really work. Not just coexist, not just manage kids in a clinic and Sunday dinners with our mothers, not just business and parenting and polite bedtime routines. Work, the kind of work that required honesty, not just from him, but from me too. I've had my own moments, vacation trysts, quick, clean, easy, no names, no numbers, nothing that ever touched a real life, nothing that ever felt like betrayal until now. Gabe and I had sort of an unspoken agreement, don't ask, don't tell kind of marriage, but we were still very committed and we were very functional. And we did things well, parenting, hosting, holiday cards, running the business. We looked like a strong couple because in many ways we were. But I didn't want that anymore. I couldn't pretend anymore. This thing, this rupture, was more than an affair. It was a mirror. Life had cracked something open in me, and I wasn't going to close back up neatly. There was no going back to the version of myself that settled for composure instead of connection. Something deeper was shifting, a kind of reckoning, a kind of surrender. Through therapy, it was painful, but it was real. And somewhere in that unraveling, I played it out in my mind. The broken family, the separate holidays, the boys with overnight bags, splitting their time between the two of us. It felt way worse than an extended family. It felt like a fracture that would keep echoing, and I knew I didn't want it. If Gabe wanted to do the work, if he was ready to truly repair the damage, not just cover it over, then so was I. And maybe for the first time in my adult life, I felt humble enough to meet it. Chapter 9. I was there for the birth, not in the room, not holding a hand. I was in the background of the background, present, steady, but small. Gabe and I had talked ahead of time. I told him I wouldn't act jealous or insecure if he needed to hold Elena's hand as their children came into the world. I could handle that. We'd done the work, 3 months of long talks, hard truths, therapy, and even more silence. We stripped our marriage down to the bones and built something better than what we had before. But here's the shift. I no longer carried his chaos. I no longer absorbed the weight of his choices. Gabe was a grown man, and if he wanted this life, these children, this marriage, then he could show up for it. I wasn't going to manage his guilt or organize his redemption. It's not my rice to cook. All 3 babies were born early, but healthy. Carter, the smallest, needed the most immediate care. All 3 went straight to NICU. They stayed for a couple of months. Gabe was busy juggling work, showing up for our boys, preparing the baby's new home with help from Levi and Leo. He was stretched thin, but focused for once. I didn't step in to smooth it all out. I wasn't cold. I was clear. I didn't go when they first came home. Not out of spite, just clarity. This wasn't my stage yet. I'd drawn that boundary early on. I would step in when the children came into my home, into my space. That would be the place I'd show up fully. And eventually they did. I became officially a stepmom. Each of them so unique, so much fun. They came into our lives like glitter on a windy day. Everywhere joyful, a bit chaotic, impossible not to love. On their 2nd birthday, Carter was sitting in the car with the window open. He spotted me across the yard and yelled, "Mum, Mum, Mum, Mum." Arms out, reaching for me, he came running, wrapped himself around me like I was his favorite blanket, and waved bye-bye to Elena like he'd done it 100 times. The girls scampered out after him, heading straight for their dad, blue-eyed and blonde hair with Gabe's skin and softness, full of art and hugs and endless questions. If there was gossip, I didn't hear it, and I wouldn't entertain it. If people needed an explanation, I offered honesty, but never drama. Gabe and I loved each other more than ever, not in the old way, not in that old, fragile, performative way we used to. This was deeper, softer, and real. I let go of some of the control. I wasn't so boss-like anymore. We talked more, laughed more. We discussed instead of declared, and together we enjoyed all 5 of our kids. Sometimes the triplets came over with Jack, Elena's old dog, who was aging and slow, but he still loved to sprawl on the rug beside our dog Spots. The awkwardness faded over time. It didn't disappear completely, but it softened around the edges. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were days where I felt jealous, unsure, emotionally tired. Days I needed Gabe to reassure me, and he did. He changed. Not just in how he showed up for the kids, but how he showed up for me. He became more vocal, more present, more willing to carry what had always fallen to me by default. And when the triplets turned 6, my mother passed away in her sleep. Elena had brought the children to the funeral. Most of my extended family hadn't met them yet. It was Carter, always Carter, who held the moment together. He slipped away from his mother and walked from person to person, taking their hands gently. Oma is okay, he told them. She in my heart and your heart. We remember her. You okay? He searched the room for anyone who looked alone and stood beside them. That's Carter, the glue in the quietest ways. The girls were all ribbons and giggles. They carried craft supplies in their backpacks and filled our house with every color every time they came over. And my boys, my beautiful sons, bonded with them in a way I'd never expect. Protective, patient, and proud. This life isn't the one I planned. It's the one I ended up choosing. And in the end, it chose me too. Victoria's epilogue. Some stories don't end with clarity. They end up with layers, loose threads, moments that will still replay when the house is quiet and the kids are asleep. If you're waiting for me to say I forgave everyone and found peace, you'll be waiting a long time. Yes, I chose to stay. I chose my family. I chose the path forward. But don't confuse that with passive acceptance. I was angry, and I still am sometimes. There are nights when I lie beside Gabe and wonder how different things could have turned out. Not out of longing, but curiosity, a soft ache, a flicker of something I still can't name. But beneath the strength people admire, there's a wound I don't show, the one that flares up unexpectedly, not loud, not dramatic, just there, a reminder that I loved him so much I stayed, and I loved myself enough not to carry his failures anymore. This was never about erasing what happened. It was about choosing what comes next. And I choose this life, not because it's easy, but because it's mine. I'm proud of the woman I've become inside of all of this. Closing thoughts from Victoria. I never asked to be the hero. I just didn't want to be the casualty. This story isn't about who was right or who was wrong. It's about what happens when life breaks open and you decide deliberately not to shatter with it. People still ask how I did it, how I stayed, how I forgave. The truth? Some days I didn't. Some days I was still angry, still raw, but I chose the life I could live with. One that kept my sons whole, one that honored the version of myself who refused to be undone by somebody else's mistake. This wasn't about being strong. It was about being honest, about being done carrying the weight that was never mine. And most of all, about knowing I could rebuild something solid, not because I was unbreakable, because I was finally willing to let go of everything that wasn't real. So if this story moved you, feel free to like, share, or subscribe to hear more Toad stories, tales of authentic decisions, because there's always more to explore. Thanks for hanging in here with me for the story.